Okay, welcome everyone to the January 25th, 2021 Park Board meeting. We have a fairly good sized group here for this evening. And I'm going to start with minutes review here. Does anybody have any comments or concerns about our minutes from our last meeting in, I guess it was December, early part of December? Not seeing anybody having issues. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve minutes? Ruben raised his hand. Ruben, anybody like to make a second for minutes? Someone? April raised her hand. Thank you, April. So minutes are approved. So I'm going to go through, do roll call with everyone, and if you could just state that you are here, and that will do it. So Chris?
I am here.
And April?
Present.
And Ruben?
Present.
And Danielle?
Present.
And we have Jeremy join us. Jeremy, could you confirm that you're here, please? Jeremy, you linked up yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. We have heard from Jonathan and Linda that they will not be here this evening. And Marlene's going to show up a little bit late, and we'll wait for Carl here sometime along the way. So given that, I'm not seeing any people from the community. Do you have anybody listed, Melissa, from public for comments?
I do not, and we did not get any emails either.
Okay. So I guess public comments are open and closed. And that leads us into regular business. We're going to have 4 items tonight for regular business. Central Park Pad 3, we're going to be having a discussion about turf replacement. We have some information about the 2021 work plan that Jeff's going to clarify some things. We have some information about the Recovery Task Force, and the 2020 Community Awards is going to be something up for us to make an action item. So given that, I guess we'll get started with Central Park Pad 3. I don't know if Jeff or Jennifer, probably a tag team match on this one.
Bit of a tag team. I'll kick it off and then turn it over to Jennifer for the presentation and Dave Andrews as well. Thanks a lot, Brad. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Excited to present this update to you. As you likely recall, late last year as we were going through the budget process and also identifying our initial work plan, the replacement of the turf fields at Central Park Pad 3 were on our approved budget list and therefore on our work plan to get done this year. Tonight really is a chance to update you on the work we've done to get that project ready and out to bid early so that we can have flexibility in not only awarding that, but getting it scheduled. We also, from some prior conversation we had with you, really want to have a conversation, a little more focused conversation with that project about a policy decision and have a discussion around the choice of infill that we would like to utilize within that project. If you recall, with synthetic turf systems consist of the fiber, the grass itself, but then the infill, often sand, crumb rubber mix is what historically is done. We think there's a real opportunity with the timing of this project Industry advancements have come a long ways, even in the last 3 years from when we had this discussion with Pad 1. Just the budget that was awarded with this project, I think, gives us some real opportunities to consider some alternatives. And is this the time that we want to consider a more organic infill type for these two fields? So we really, in the presentation that Jennifer's going to give, Dave Andrews, who's our consultant landscape architect and turf guru, is here too. To facilitate, answer any questions you have, and just have a discussion tonight and see if there's a perspective you all have as we move forward with this project. I know the mayor will be very interested to hear your opinions and where you might want to go in terms of type of infill we may want to consider. So with that, Jen Fink, project manager, take it away.
First thing is unmute, and now let me share my screen. Bear with me a moment. Hold on. Sorry, bear with me a second here. It is pulling the wrong screen. Hold on. There we go. Hold on 1 second here. There we go. How's that?
Looks great.
So, hi everyone. Nice to be giving you an update on the Central Park Pad 3 project. Tonight we have with us Dave Andrews, who's our consultant with CPH Consultants, and he also helped us with our Pad 1 and also Central Park Pad 3 way back when, back in 2008 when it was first installed. So Dave has a lot of history with Central Park, and we look forward to his contribution to the conversations tonight, as well as artificial turf fields. We're going to provide a brief presentation on the Central Park Pad 3 background, kind of the previous project that we're going to be replacing the turf on. We'll also talk about the framework of the turf replacement project for this year. Also, we'll be talking about the different types of infill, and then we're going to pose the question and open it up for discussion. Is there a preference that you, the park board, would like to use for infill at Central Park Pad 3? Central Park Pad 3, some of the backgrounds. The fields that are there now were constructed in 2008, and they were funded with the 2006 Park Bond. The carpet and infill that is used there is pure SBR rubber. There is no sand in those on those fields as infill. And artificial turf systems, their life cycle is pretty short. It's an 8 to 15 year period, depending upon use and wear. And right now we're in that 12, 13 year mark for replacement. Here are the aerial view of the fields, and you can see some of the wear that is occurring up there. They get a heavy use. The turf itself is at the end of its useful life. It's starting to not respond like it should. And we also have the turf replacement fund with the creation of Central Park Pad 1 artificial turf fields. With the rental of those fields, we take a portion of the fund, the monies received to pay for maintenance and operations, but also to go into the turf replacement fund as part of our annual maintenance project, knowing that with these artificial turf field investments, there is a life cycle cost, and so we do have some funding available to use for this project. Here's another view. You can see that these fields are typically used for your rectangular sports, which are soccer, lacrosse, and football. And you can see some of the wear patterns that are starting to happen in the fields from heavy use. Some of the framework for this turf replacement project was really, we want to maintain the same uses that we're getting, which is soccer, lacrosse, and football. We have to replace both the carpet and the infill system, which is much like replacing the carpet in your home. The drainage, which is part of the substructure of the artificial turf fields, that is going to remain as is. We hope to not have to touch that other than maybe fill in some low spots or some settling, but that is pretty much remaining as is. But as part of this project, we also wanted to avoid certain types of infill that may require watering as additional forms of maintenance. We'll get into it in the next screen, but there are also, as part of the carpet and infill systems, there's oftentimes a pad that gets added to, much like a pad on your carpet at home. Part of the scope of the project is also to replace the damaged fence sections. If you've been up there from soccer and lacrosse balls specifically, when they miss the net, they hit the fence and do some damage, and there's quite a bit of bowing. So in just some certain areas, we'll be replacing 4-foot sections of fence. It's a nominal cost to the project. But fortunately, we are going to be able to do the full project, carpet replacement, infill options available, and potentially add a carpet and still stay within, or a pad, and still stay within our available budget of $1.6 million provided for this project. Here's kind of where we're at with the line configurations, going more towards a universal striping system for men's and women's lacrosse. And also, it's very hard to see, but there are going to be tick lines out here for football, which had not previously been on the field, but still have the soccer and lacrosse lines, much like they do right now. So as we explored infill options for the artificial turf, we looked at the SBR rubber with sand and pea gravel infill. This is the same type of infill that we have existing up at Central Park Pad 1. It's an economical and very commonly used product. But one of the other options we explored was looking at going to a more organic infill, which in doing so, it does require a pad to be laid down underneath the carpet before it goes down, and it helps with fall attenuation. And those pads, typically, though it's an initial investment at this time, they do have a 20 to 30 year lifespan, so they could last another 1, 2, and maybe even a third replacement cycle, depending upon the product used. But we've also explored a hybrid, which is an organic cork with rubber. The percent of rubber used is much less than what would be on a full rubber field or a sand rubber mixed field, but there is a little bit of rubber in there. Like I said, all of the options we explored fit within our available budget. And I did send out, as a pre-meeting informational item, some definitions about the different types of rubber, the rubber infill, what cork infill, how silica sand is used as part of these infill systems. And I'm sorry they didn't get attached as part of the meeting packet, but we will attach them as part of the meeting minutes as well. But if you have any questions about that, we've got Dave here that can also help answer some questions. So with that, I would like to just open it up to Jeff or if he has any additional comments, or Dave, and to the park board.
Jen, thank you for that overview. It's Jeff again. Just, I think real quick, and then turn it over to you, Brad, for discussion. Jen mentioned the turf replacement fund. We just wanted to note that in the presentation. As you recall, as that is a new funding source that was adopted in 2018. That's not fully funding this project and wasn't intended to, but it is certainly funding a portion of the project. The intention is, as that turf replacement fund builds up over multiple years, by the time we're replacing the turf at pad 1 that was done in 2018, we'll be much closer to, if not fully funding, the turf replacement projects. Jennifer's mentioned reference of football tick lines. What those will be is 10-yard increments along the sidelines. There will be different coloration that will allow, as we know, there's a lot of football practices that are up there, but would allow sort of an easy placement of cones or other markers to assist with those practices and those uses. One thing I was going to mention in terms of, as we're exploring these options, SBR, I'm going to have to phone a friend. I don't know what that acronym is, but basically it's reference to the traditional crumb rubber crushed tire product. Dave can probably give specifics of that. There's a fourth type of infill that that's out there that we're not considering, really because of, I think, more than anything, budget. What we're presenting with these 3 general options is, as we look at prices, we'd be purchasing this turf through KCDA, which is a co-op we belong to. It's how we purchased Pad 1 fields. We feel confident that we have budget with any of those 3 options we presented. The industry is starting to look at thermoplastics, and I'm not going to act like I'm a scientist that I know what thermoplastics are, but imagine the infill being plastic instead of rubber. It's still quite costly and would probably be more than what we have budget for. And as we look at organic options, we wanted to present and explore options, and again, feel like the industry is getting more advanced enough to consider pure organic versus just replacing rubber with plastic as another non-organic substance. So that's why that's not necessarily an option we're looking at, but happy to have discussion about that. Dave, anything to add in that really broad overview?
No, I think you've done an excellent job. I'd just like to add that it's really disturbing to me that it's been 12 years since this field was built, because I feel like it was just done, and so it makes me feel old.
I feel the same way.
Oh, time. What fun.
Yes.
So that, Brad, as chair, I turn it back over to you. If there's Q&A or discussion or however you guys want to handle it.
Okay, I think let's kind of go around the horn here, and I have a whole bunch of questions, but I don't want to hog all the time, so I'll let everybody else on the board go first. And so go ahead and raise your hand. I'll call on you. So Ruben, what questions do you have?
Yeah, of the 3 options for infill, is there any particular infill that maintenance-wise is easier to maintain than any of the others?
Should I take that? They're all essentially the same. That was really kind of one of the criteria that we looked at, was ensuring that we were evaluating and selecting options that wouldn't require any additional maintenance. And Jennifer mentioned that the earlier iterations of the cork or the cork and coconut husk truly organic infills required supplemental watering to keep them settled down, or they would float during heavy rainstorms. And so I think part of the reason that the city is entertaining doing an organic infill now is that the technology has improved to the point where not only is it safe in terms of Gmax and impact attenuation, but it's also easy to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Danielle?
I have a couple of questions. One is in one of the pre-reads, there was a note about rubber that wasn't recycled but was rather like new rubber. Is that what's used in that hybrid model, or is the hybrid the recycled rubber as well?
No, you're correct. The one of the two options we settled on, and I should say we basically had two separate vendors price this in order to make it, even though it's going through KCDA, we wanted them to sharpen their pencils. One of the vendors has a pure cork infill as an organic alternative. The other vendor actually has two different types of cork. One is a cork and coconut mix, which again requires additional watering and maintenance. So that one got ruled out. And the blended product that we did have them bid, it basically consists of cork, natural tree rubber, and then they call it virgin SBR, which basically means that it hasn't gone through the chemical processes like vulcanization that tires go through. So it's not an end of life product like a crumb rubber is. But it's used in the manufacture of gaskets. So if you can imagine, they make this SBR, they manufacture the gasket, and then the waste from the manufacturing process is what goes into this product. So that they call it virgin SBR, but it's essentially still synthetic rubber.
And that
Go
would be
ahead.
the option that's used in the hybrid kind of connection option.
Yes.
Okay.
So it does have a little bit of, it has some cork, it has some natural rubber from rubber trees, and it has some synthetic rubber. It's just not post-consumer product.
Okay. Probably in 2008 when we were doing this project, so I guess it would have been like before that when we were talking about these. My recollection is that one of the other drawbacks on the natural surfaces was maybe a higher a concern about bacteria growth or kind of like staph growing. Is that still a concern, or are these products has that also been eliminated as an issue?
Well, I wouldn't say it's been eliminated because they're organic materials. They not so much staph or bacterial, but seedlings will sprout in them. So you have to make sure that you're dragging and sweeping the field on a regular maintenance schedule to keep stuff from setting up in there. But in terms of staph infection, I have not seen any data that suggests it's any more prone to that than the traditional SBR infill.
Okay, and then I have one more question, and that is probably the big concern for the athletes is like, how are those alternatives? What's the playability, and what other fields in our region are using those? And I would like to be able to talk to people who are playing on them and see how they play and what's the difference.
Yes, and that really is the big deal. 10 years ago, this technology was brand new, and people were on a steep learning curve, and there weren't any case studies to go look at. Now there are quite a few, and the manufacturers have continued to refine their product and their installation procedures. The city of Woodinville at Carroll Edwards Park, which is the park, if you go out 405 and you come down into Woodinville, it's the park right at that main corner when you first arrive into town.
The big multi-use.
That's correct,
park.
yes. Yep. They just installed the 100% cork infill that is one of our two bid options. So that's the best one that I could point you to. There are several others that are close but not quite the same. Renton's Memorial Stadium has the cork and coconut husk. No, that's not right. South Kitsap High School has the cork and coconut husk. I know that Chief Sealth Stadium in West Seattle is a cork field. And actually, the City of Seattle Parks Department has gone to 100. They're doing all their fields with cork or cork and coconut products. So now we can go and we can look at how these fields have been acting and behaving and their playability over a 5-year period or so. And generally, what we're hearing and finding is that the infill is great. It's fine. The playability of these fields has more to do with the type of turf fiber that you choose. And so we're going with a hybrid fiber, which is 50% monofilament, 50% slit film, which gives you the best of both worlds in terms of encapsulating the infill so you don't get a lot of fly out. But the monofilament fibers stand up straight, so soccer balls bounce and roll true. So generally, they've been well received. The other point I would make is that the organic infills, as Jen mentioned, do require a shock pad underneath to ensure that you're getting the Gmax or impact attenuation numbers that you want. And one of the advantages of having a pad is that once you've got that pad, you're really sort of insulated against having a field get too hard over time, which can be a problem with the traditional infills if they're not properly maintained.
Hey, Dave, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yep.
Thanks for those questions, Danielle. Really good. In terms of you mentioned to go with a full organic, obviously the recommended maintenance for grooming, to make sure seedlings don't sprout. That's a pretty typical recommended grooming rate, even with a full sand rubber mix, right?
Yes, I have seen 2-inch tall cottonwood trees in a sand rubber field before.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah. So without that maintenance frequency of grooming, regardless of the infill, right? There's that risk of growth. Yeah.
And just based on my own personal experience, the pad 3 site isn't so much a worry for that. It's the sites that are close to a forested area, and so maybe that first you get a lot of leaf drop on them, or they're in the shade quite a bit, so you can actually get moss on them. Those are the fields where we usually see that kind of thing. But yours is so out in the open that I am sure you haven't had that problem in the past, and I wouldn't expect that you will now.
Yeah, no, I just appreciated Danielle's question. And again,
Yeah,
I think our grooming frequency is really essential for health and safety, regardless of what surface we go with.
Right.
Marlene, I see a hand there.
Yes, hi, thanks. I appreciate this conversation. I don't know about how many of you guys are trying to clean that rubber off of your kids' clothes, or it's in your car or everywhere. My son actually got some in his eye playing at Dodd Field last week. So I'm excited about the idea if we can do something that's safer, but still keeps the playability and the maintenance. And so I think that's exciting. A question that I had regarding the full cork versus the hybrid. I'm curious if you could help us understand sort of the pros and cons or benefits of, to me, it sounds like, if we can go all organic, why wouldn't we do that? But maybe there's some benefits I don't understand about the hybrid model.
The short answer is no, there really isn't. We arrived at the choices that we arrived at in kind of by a process of elimination, trying to find the best, most highest percentage of organic product choices that we could, kind of coupled with selecting vendors that have a turf product that's proven and has a good track record, and who have a good track record of being able to deliver their product on time and install it properly and stand up behind their warranty, you know, kind of all of those things that you would look for in a contractor or a vendor. And then again, also the maintenance, the vendor who has this hybrid product also does offer a 100% organic product. It's cork and coconut, and it requires additional maintenance. So we kind of weighed those choices and decided, well, it's not 100% natural, but it's, yeah, I can't tell you the exact percentage, but it's a lot closer. So it seemed like the best choice.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Marlene, yeah, I think to compare, you know, to look at the playability again, and Dave did a good job of explaining, playability is really the mix of fiber we choose and the infill, right? The difference between the fiber and all cork infill versus the fiber that was in that bid with this hybrid model. Everything we've seen and heard, playability is not going to be a trade-off between one or the other. It really is going to come down to, you know, do we want to consider an all organic or a partial organic between those two options. And as Dave said, you know, what we felt the trade-off was going with this hybrid option versus a coconut cork mix that we didn't feel was viable because of the added maintenance and need for watering.
So
Thank you,
that's
that's
the one.
helpful.
That's the one
I'm just-
that Seattle put in.
That's the one that South Kitsap
Okay.
High School has, and again, they're watering that pretty frequently.
Thank you for those. The other thing that I would just add, and I liked the analogy of the carpet, and in your house, and I always find the best place to spend the money is in that pad. So I guess I did a little reading on the safety of that, even in other fields. So appreciate, you know, really thinking about sort of the safety of our athletes with the pad, and would want to encourage us just to think about, you know, as we're allocating budget, making sure that that's, you know, top of mind for safety.
We want to think of this investment too as how are we positioning for the future? Where's the industry going? And I think understanding as infill options continue to evolve and will likely evolve by the next time we're replacing carpet. I think with a pad, we're going to be more better resourced for those other infill options. So this is sort of an investment now, but I think it also positions those fields into the future as well.
Are you done, Marlene? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, with the hybrid infill, are the rubber particles, are they shredded or are they the cryo generated?
They're cryo.
Okay. And that for those that may not be familiar, if you look under a microscope, the shredded ones kind of look like this. They have a lot of surface area, but then they release a lot of dust and whatever. But then the cryo ones are more like a little cube, and they're a little bit more stable, so last longer.
Anything else, Chris? Questions from anybody else? I'll jump in with a couple. Jen and Jeff, has there been any feedback from the sports leagues that actually use these fields to get their feedback or input in terms of their preferences?
No, a lot of our conversations last year as we were framing this up were really focused on striping and what lines look like. I think, taking feedback we hear from you, getting feedback from those groups will be a next step.
Okay, so that is something you plan to do, though.
Yes, before this would go to council, we would let those groups know what we're considering and get their feedback.
Okay. What does the Seahawks and Huskies use in their fields, out of curiosity?
They are all still crumb rubber. Well, crumb rubber and sand blended.
Which is similar to what we have at Central Park Pad 1. So that's the generation we just installed.
Right.
They have pads underneath.
They do, yes.
Oh, with a pad. Good point, Chris. We do not have a pad at Pad 1. That's a bit redundant.
And they do it a little different. A football team wants a really fast field, and a soccer team wants something to play more like natural grass. And so they have competing interests in that respect, and they can kind of balance it with the pad underneath.
And out of curiosity, you said that all of these options can stay within budget, whereas the SBR only doesn't have a pad, whereas the organics do. How are you able to add a pad and still stay within budget? Is the organics less expensive than the SBR to offset those costs, or how does that work?
No, it's a great question, Brad. I think as we budgeted the project itself, we're the 1.6 is at a level where to add a pad and to go with the organics, we would still be within that number. If we were to go without a pad and just do the more traditional SBR sand mix, it would be less expensive. So we wouldn't be spending as much. Again, we haven't gotten final prices, but it's probably a couple $100,000 difference. But again, a question of what, I think what we should anticipate with any synthetic field we put in and manage for the next 20, 30, 40 years is we will need to be putting a pad on synthetic turf fields at some point in the future.
So might as well do it now then, right?
Well, that's a consideration, but your question's a really good one. Is that there would be there'd be a near-term savings if we went with no pad and crumb rubber and sand, but it might be an expense we're going to end up paying, 10 years from now, 15 years from now when we do it next time.
And are these organic products not safer in the long run? I mean, Dave, what's your thought on that?
Well, if you're referring to the concern about carcinogens, cancer in the SBR, they're just, to date, to my knowledge, there's been no scientific testing or evidence to support the claims of cancer from the SBR rubber infills. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of stories, but doesn't seem to be backed up by scientific research. It's also true that the measurable pollutants in runoff and off-gassing from SBR fields are below any federal thresholds. I think we all, when we stand on a rubber field on a hot day, can kind of smell it, and so there clearly is off-gassing. And so, intuitively going to an organic infill, there'll be less or none of that. So to answer your question, they're not safer because no one's proved that the SBR rubber infills are unsafe. I think we all like the idea of getting away from using the recycled tires as an infill and going to a more organic approach. I think that's where the industry is headed. Another thing I might mention is that in terms of the heat on these fields, the organic infills, because you're not putting that black heat absorbing product on the ground, they have a lower albedo, so they don't get quite as hot, which is definitely a benefit.
Has there been any litigation that's addressed any of these safety concerns?
That's an excellent question. I'm sure there has. I can't point to specific lawsuits, however. And to my knowledge, no one has successfully litigated against any of the turf companies for the use of, or, won in a court of law a claim against them for injury related to SBR rubber.
And the rubber versus organic, the longevity is about the same?
Yes, they're all warranted the same, and with maintenance, proper maintenance, the playability and the G-Max is the same. That's one of the benefits of being, 6, 8, 10 years down the road now, and starting to be able to have case studies where we can actually see what one of these fields looks like that's been played on for that length of time. So, yeah, we're confident that that the life cycle cost and the lifespan is equivalent.
Yeah, that consistent vendor warranty with any of the products is really helpful.
Is there any moisture buildup problems with these organic products? That's a pretty sloppy area up there. I mean, is that a concern at all in terms of getting it too wet?
Well, no. The fields are designed to drain extremely efficiently, and there's a full drainage system. The base rock underneath them is very porous. The turf product itself drains extremely well, and I think some of the earlier attempts at the organic coconut products did have some problems with biodegrading and turning to mush and or floating, literally floating. And now through refinements to what goes into the mix and the particle size and how it's you can't cryogenically break up crumb rubber, cork, but you can cut it to shape and size, so that the particle size is getting the best of both worlds in terms of drainage, but also knitting together to perform the way we want those infills to perform. So not so much an issue in terms of getting moist. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier about the fields that I've seen, that I've done, that have problems are the ones that are in shade or up against a forested or wooded edge. And we don't have that condition here.
Jeremy, you're kind of the sports guy of the crew here. You got any comments about preferences or anything?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties tonight. I'm not sure what's going on, but I guess I've played on all sorts of different surfaces. I don't know as if I played on one that's the cork. A lot of crumb rubber. I don't know as if I have a preference either way. It ends up in your shoes no matter what. Maybe this cork would not be as much. I worry. I'm not sure how to put this in terms, but like when you fall and the absorption of the fall and injury and stuff, does it still have the same absorption properties, the cork stuff?
Yes, it does. And I would argue that with the addition of the pad, it's maybe better. You certainly have the G-Max, which is the units that they use to measure the impact attenuation is the same. And again, because you've got that pad, which has a certain amount of cushion that does not go away over time, even if you're having some issues with the infill, which we wouldn't expect to have, you're always going to have that pad. So from a safety, from a cushioning perspective, they're the same.
And then what about spreadability? I mean, how do they, do you have to add more to it all the time, just like the current crumb rubber one? Because right now in this current way we do it, there's times where there's like massive piles of crumb rubber just sitting there, and the kids are having to like spread out with their feet. But
So if you're having massive piles of crumb rubber, then something else has gone wrong. That shouldn't be happening. And I know that up at Pad 3 now, I know there were some issues with maintenance for a while. I think it maybe got overfilled at some point. But to answer your question more directly, the system is designed for that infill to stay in place as best it can. One of the reasons that we're going with the hybrid fiber type is that slit film fiber over time, as it fibrillates and breaks up, it curls over and does a good job of holding that infill in place. But you do have to maintain it. You do have to rake it because that helps keep the infill properly distributed. And in the high wear areas, right in front of the goal mouth or right at the center circle or the corner kick area where you get a lot of, intensive traffic, you do have to pay attention to those areas. And they may require a periodic top dressing. But that's no different than an SBR field.
So would you say it sits down inside the turf better than the crumb rubber?
I would say it's really the same. I don't think it sits down particularly better, but I don't think it flies out anymore. And we're not seeing issues with it floating. That was an issue early on in this experiment with cork, was that sometimes this stuff would float. In fact, I went up, and I would really encourage you all to go up and take a walk on that at Carroll Edwards Park, because that is a true apples to apples comparison to what we're looking at here. So if you really want to see what it's like, I'd go look up there. And I went up there the other day after we had that big storm because I was curious, and there was no evidence of any infill movement at all.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? So I'm assuming the hybrid, oops, did you have something, Danielle?
Oh, yeah, I just want to say, to the extent that that they're all the same budget-wise, I mean, my instinct is to do the organic material. There were reasons why we haven't done that in the past. But I know that there aren't, I understand that there aren't studies or that say or, definitively that the crumb rubber is a problem, but just, it seems like if I was going to choose one or the other, I would go organic, especially because those little pellets end up everywhere, they really do. So.
Sorry if I missed it. So are we replacing the turf portion too, or just the infill? Or you got to replace the whole thing?
The whole thing. Yeah, the whole deal, whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
And my computer finally came back on when I heard football lines. So, but I missed a good portion of that. So are we going to have some sort of football lines this time?
So, go ahead, Dave.
We're not going to stripe it for football. We're going to put 4-inch square layout markers at each 10-yard interval all the way around what would be the perimeter of a football field. So it would make it very easy to set out cones, or theoretically you could paint it and you'd be able to use those as layout markers. Other than that, we're just going to have soccer, and then we're going with the U.S. Lacrosse Unified Lacrosse layout. So it's a blend of the boys and girls lacrosse. So we don't have two sets of lacrosse lines competing with each other.
Is that because lacrosse is more popular than football? That was a facetious question. I thought that was not true. So
I can't answer that one. That one's Jeff's.
Have you talked to the lacrosse? Is it called lacrosse clubs, and are they okay with that?
Yes, we got the recommendation from them that the unified was acceptable.
I mean, I think the fewer lines that are confusing, probably the better.
well, I'm not sure how Issaquah High School can do it, but we can't figure it out. Don't they have soccer and football in the same field?
Yeah, I'm not sure what your question you're asking, Jeremy. Are you saying?
I'm saying why can't we get football lines on there? It's the most
Like
popular sport.
A full football field?
Yeah.
Well, knowing that traditionally there's not games up there, there is an added cost with that much inlay of striping. We certainly thought it would be a benefit to, again, at least have those tick sheets to aid in the number of practices that take place up there.
So overall, is the hybrid what you're recommending?
The hybrid infill, Brett? I think if you were asked to ask a staff recommendation, as we've kicked the tires and looked at the Woodinville field and other ones, our recommendation would be to go with the cork, this sort of third generation of cork, and go with an all organic infill with the addition of the pad. But again, really appreciate this discussion. I really want to hear what your all perspective is. Jennifer and I have a meeting with the mayor and city administrator later this week to talk about a couple capital projects, this being one of them. And again, would just be open to any input you all have. If there's consensus, if you want to sort of give an advisory recommendation and or just summary discussion, I would love to deliver your feedback either way.
Hey, Jeff, back to your comment about not having games up there. If we were to have games up there, then it would warrant putting lines on the field. Because I mean, the reason there's no games up there is there's no lines on the field.
Right, a bit of a chicken and the egg.
Perhaps,
yeah. That is not something. Again, I guess as we did this replacement, Jeremy, we were looking at the historical use and understanding, I think, the intensity of use and the mix of use that we're having to manage in the fall when football games and football season is happening, and the likelihood of that being able to host football games and soccer games is relatively light relative to the investment and the cost and the visible impact of all those football lines. I think Brian probably has a little bit more of that history than I do.
Yeah, and Jim, I could just speak. It's been a little while, but I know that in the past, the discussion was that the football games were intentionally wanted to be held at the high schools. For that, you're at the high school. That's where you're going to be in the future. The stadium, the whole field. I know that feeling, and that's where, at least way back when, and for a number of years, that was at least the philosophy was that games wanted to be at the high school because of just more energy, just by the very nature of what you're playing on, right? That's just a little history.
yeah. But the excuse is of it doesn't look as good doesn't enter into my mind. Every high school field I've been on, played football on, has soccer and football on it. So it's not it's not like people are not used to seeing football and soccer together on the same field.
April, did I see you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw in my vote for a more organic option. A lot of the chrome rubber type options, from what I have read, it seems that the runoff can be, it could potentially contaminate streams and things. So I think going with an organic or a more organic option or a more natural option would help with keeping chemicals potentially out of our streams.
I'd be curious, going back to Jeremy's question about football and lacrosse and soccer. Is this one of the few places where there is an opportunity to do lacrosse where the lines are marked? It's my understanding there's lots of places to do soccer and football, but maybe fewer for lacrosse, but maybe I'm wrong on that. So I'm just curious, as an intended use, are these fields meant to be sort of a housing place for lacrosse?
Yes. We also have lacrosse lines at Pad 1 fields as well that we just installed.
I kind of am on the same boat with April and others that have made comment. I think organic is a better way to go environmentally and potentially safety. And it sounds like they've worked out the issues that they're as playable as rubber. So I mean, it seems to make sense that that's the way to go. Not to mention, ultimately, recycling capability when you remove the field. Those products probably could be recycled versus the rubber would, I don't know, have to go to a landfill maybe, I don't know. Jeff, do you need an action item here?
Don't need it. No, I guess, hearing it and I guess seeing head nods. I don't know if you're comfortable just giving a sense, if I was to communicate that, given the discussion and given what there's a preference to strongly consider the all cork option for the install. Is that an accurate way to put it?
I would say especially subject to the sports teams, the local sports teams kind of blessing as well.
Yep. Feedback.
That really does. It does matter as far as, if there are significant differences. And I understand some of that might be on the artificial grass, but.
Completely agree. Yes, that playability is still a primary reason for this investment. So,
yes.
Great. I'll communicate that. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the discussion. If I could just add, Jeremy, I appreciate your questions about football. And I guess respecting those questions, I just want to get a sense from other board members. Is there, I don't want to misspeak. And again, as we're proceeding with the program as was decided upon previously, we're not consider football striping, but is that something you as a board want to discuss, or?
But who decided that? I don't remember talking about, are we considering football or not? I missed that meeting.
I think that meeting took place given the original, when the lines were put in 2000, the mid 2000s, I guess is what I'm referencing, Jeremy.
Any recollection on that, Danielle?
I don't remember that, but I think the games have been at the high school for as long as my kids and probably Brian's kids were playing, and then also like the older kids practice at the middle school. So the middle schools have turf fields that have football lines as well. So, but there's all the younger kids all practice at Central Park. So, to the extent that football lines would help with those practices, I guess I would want to just know what the cost is, and then also be cognizant of once you put those lines on Park Pad 1 are, there's so many lines, right? So at what point do you get line overkill?
Mm-hmm.
We have baseball in there too, right?
Just wanted to add, in talking with the user groups about lines, they all get used to which lines they're playing with, and it tends not to be so much of an issue for the players as more from the outsiders who maybe aren't as familiar with the field markings trying to watch a game, because the users learn to adapt. So whether it's a boys and girls or just the unified lines and soccer's, because over at Pad 1 we have baseball, soccer, boys lacrosse, and girls lacrosse. So there's 4 different lines at least on one field for people to have to pay attention to. But the user groups really don't have much of a care either way, but they did opt to, instead of doing the boys and girls lacrosse lines, to go the unified route for these field updates.
Yeah, the only user group I've heard complain about the lines is the football, not having football lines. And we just kind of try to guesstimate and walk off, step off where 10 yards is. I haven't seen how these little markers you're talking about look. Maybe if I saw a picture of it, how it is, I don't know.
So picture along all the sidelines, there would be these different colorations, Jeremy, that would denote 10-yard increments. So all along the sidelines. So something that I've certainly seen in practice with a number of fields that I've installed with other cities. If we wanted to consider painting, right? Maybe a couple of those we work with the football group and paint 10-yard 10-yard lines as a way of better assisting in practices. And if that's really a primary place for that program's practice and not games, I think there's some things we could do within that football season to use those 10-yard marks, either just, if it helps for certain age groups to just have cones every 10 yards, it's going to be real simple for coaches to do that. But if there's a desire to maybe paint some of those 10-yard lines as an assistance, it just gives much more flexibility to aid in those practices.
What is the cost difference to add football lines?
A complete football field, I don't know.
Well, yeah, it would depend on how far you went with that.
Like if you replicate Issaquah High School field that has soccer, football, doesn't it have lacrosse as well?
But you're never going to have good games there because you don't have goalposts and stuff, right? I mean, I don't think you'd have to. I think what you would want are enough sufficient lines to make practice easier and useful. But I don't think you'd ever. It would be unusual, I think, that you would actually have an actual there.
Okay, let's move along. Anybody else got any questions or comments? Is that good enough for now, Jeff?
So thank you. Thank you very much for the discussion. Jennifer, thank you. Dave, thanks so much for joining and providing all your insights.
You bet.
Dave, you can sign off.
Thank you, Dave. Unless you want to just keep with us, you're welcome.
What else are you going to talk about?
Work plan.
I will say my goodbyes.
Thank you very much.
So you know how to reach me.
Dave.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I have
Right.
one more question that's not turf related, but related to the field.
Okay, go ahead.
Have you mentioned replacing the fencing because it's been damaged with balls getting kicked and whatnot? I was just wondering, like I know up in Preston for Eastside FC when they installed like an actual cement wall for kids to intentionally kick off of and do drills and whatnot. And I don't know if that's something that's uniformly like desired by soccer people, or if so, if that would be something that could be kind of accommodated and like wrapped into the project. Chris, I don't know, you're a soccer guy, right? So if you have an opinion.
I designed that wall. It's just a retaining wall that we decided to make into something that the soccer kids could use as best we could.
Yeah.
One thing that could be looked at though is heavier gauge mesh, or also even on a 4-foot, putting a mid rail in it, just because the kids will just kick and kick and kick and.
Yeah, we do have a mid rail. I believe it has a mid rail.
Yes.
And we are going to 6 gauge, Chris, on that fabric.
Like penitentiary quality.
Yeah. We thought about going to a smaller, like 1 3/4 or 1.5 inches, but the cost goes up, and I'm not sure how much benefit you really get from that. So.
If you have that, is it okay then for kids to kick on it, or is it still something that you would want to discourage them from doing?
We would likely discourage them. It wouldn't meant to be that. I think as we work with Issaquah Soccer Club, and I mean, much like Eastside does in Preston, right? They have little rebound walls and other portable devices that accomplish some of that same goal, right? So I think the budget allows for some, increasing the gauge, as Dave said, increasing a mid bar, but pouring a cement wall would be pretty cost prohibitive pretty quickly.
And I also just wanted to add, with the scope of work that we're doing right now, this is being done as a maintenance project and not having to go through a full permitting project, because it is really just, we're pulling up the old carpet and putting down new carpet. There's no new construction. By doing a wall or something, we'd have to go through a whole permitting process in order to construct a wall.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thank you, Dave. Appreciate your help.
You bet.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, so I guess we're on to the next phase here, which is Jeff, going to talk a little bit about the 2021 work plan.
I will, Brad. Thank you. Melissa or Jennifer, thanks so much for volunteering to share the work plan as I go through this. Again, appreciated the discussion previously. I think make up a little bit of time with this, but what this represents, if you've had a chance to open it, is similar to what we've done the last couple of years. Really a quarter by quarter look at our major projects and initiatives within the entire department. Obviously, a lot of what your focus is as the Parks Board is related to our park projects, which make up the first 2 pages of this document, but also wanted to give you some context as to other projects that are within our department and what we're managing. As we start to fine tune this and look at really cadence of our year, what our staff resources are, how we're looking at sequencing what we're going to get started right away, what we're going to hold off on. This work plan tries to really balance and be informed by a lot of those things. Just to remind you, the color coding, what we tried to do when you look at the tasks within the quarter, the sort of the orangey salmon color is really meant to denote when we're in a planning, sort of a conceptual planning, initial engagement phase with a project. The yellowish color is meant to denote when we're in design and permitting of that specific project or initiative. And then the blue is meant to note when we are transitioning to and we're in either a construction phase, we're actually building what it is we were designing and planning, or in some cases with a project, what we're implementing, actually implementing some work. I would note as well that late last year, the city adopted a new environmental review process that any capital project, private or public, is going to be asked to embed and go through when you're doing any type of site-based development. So that's any development that's on a parcel of land. And so what you'll see within this work plan, I'll point out the 2 play area projects that are first. You'll note that we talk about the environmental review for this work. What we are working on currently, and have already had some meetings with the planning department that'll be overseeing that environmental review, is that's not a single sort of task, but that's going to be work, that environmental review work is going to be work that we want to embed early on in our community engagement. And then obviously as we're going through design and permitting. So just using the 2 play area projects, for example, as we schedule out our neighborhood engagement, we want to have neighborhood engagement both addressing sort of the environmental realities of the site, what's going on with the site, while we're also seeking public input on the project itself. As we do a later stage of engagement, you'll see where it says further public engagement under design and permitting. That public engagement would both be intended to talk about the project itself, but also accomplish the environmental review as we're working that through with planning. So the same would be true, that environmental review process, again, would be embedded in really all of our projects. So our master planning projects that are identified a little farther down on this first page, where we plan on later in the year, starting again our master planning efforts, sort of site by site with Tibbetts Valley Park, Veterans Memorial Park, and Issaquah Creek Corridor. that engagement work in that orangish color while we're doing sort of the planning and conceptual level still. That environmental review will be part of that master planning work. As you see in this schedule, we anticipate actual implementation or adoption, completion of that master plan. The blue color is going to definitely go into 2022. You'll see too, with that project specifically, with one park planner on staff now, the first 2 quarters of our year are really going to be focused on those play area projects, the turf replacement project we were just talking about, the wayfinding and park signage, continuation of work that started last year, and then this master planning work we see picking up late second quarter or third quarter of the year, and thus going into 2022, which we also see as beneficial in that what master plan adoption looks like is going to be dependent upon some work that the planning department's going on with what they call Title 18. Title 18 is a full section of the city code that's getting updated. As that code's getting updated, it's going to inform us what adoption of future master plans look like. So I'll stop there and see maybe if you have any of you have specific questions about some of these capital projects that I can point out or help answer before I sort of have some concluding comments. Looks like Jen has some added feedback as well. Jen, you might need to unmute. Oh. Still muted.
You need to unmute, Jen. Have you given up, Jen? There we are.
Okay, there we go.
There she is.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute wasn't working. And isn't that the term of 2020, unmute? Just to clarify, the environmental review is necessary only on a level 2 or greater project that has environmental impacts. If there are no environmental impacts, it doesn't need to be completed. Like sometimes a street project per se wouldn't need to go through that project or that process. So just wanted to, there is a threshold level for which that's being implemented.
Right, and that's all is how it was adopted. And I think how we're approaching as parks, realizing that our projects aren't in public right of way, our projects are on parcels, that we really want to set into practice, demonstrating even as we go into that initial public engagement with a community or a neighborhood, is demonstrating and showing that environmental checklist and what we understand and what we know of the site itself, and what we're intending to do, and understanding what's happening environmentally on that property or that parcel. So any questions, comments?
So on the anchor parks, Jeff, starting into, looks like partly into the second quarter, I guess. Is there going to be some public engagement that's anticipated, and we're probably not going to be ready for that unless they're going to do it online by then? Is that what's being thought about?
Yeah, so where we identify engagement phase 2, that's really we're at that point in that project of the next phase of public engagement. That's one of the things we want to wait and see, Brad. Right? So where are we at in terms of, can we host those person to person, or will they need to be virtual, or some combination thereof, depending on where we're at with COVID recovery?
Ruben, I see your hand there. Need to unmute, Ruben.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, I had a question on the carbon credit program. I don't quite understand it, but how is money generated that you get?
Yeah, great. I'm not a carbon expert, but I'll try and put this succinctly. So there is an industry, there's a market now. Companies are interested in buying as they seek to become carbon neutral. They want to purchase carbon sequestration. So there, as we as a city plant thousands of trees every year as part of our succession planning, what we want to pilot, and this was a discussion we had with council last year, is what would it look like to apply, last year we're planting nearly 10,000 trees, about 9,500 trees. We'd love to take those 9,500 trees and work with a nonprofit partner, a group called City Forest Credits out of Seattle, and offer that into the carbon market. And there are businesses that would love to purchase, in essence, the carbon that's going to be gained from those 9,500 trees. So it's work that we're already doing. Is there a way to receive those funds then? Those funds could then help be part of funding our ongoing work with Green Issaquah or other urban forest goals.
So the companies are buying credit is what they're buying for this. Okay.
So they would, in essence, pay us over the next 10, 15, 20 years, the carbon that would be additionally captured in those new trees that we're planting.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Danielle, you got something?
Yeah, my recollection with the where we were on the master planning process was that we were starting to engage with the baseball community in particular, have about a deeper conversation with Tibbetts and Veterans Memorial. And I just, I think that there's probably room to have continue some of those conversations, maybe before, maybe there's not time or manpower to do that before your engagement plan kind of gets full steam, but it seems like that would be beneficial sometime this spring to sort of just follow up with conversations.
Agreed. Some of the conversations we've initiated, some of the work, in particular, the sub-consultant who specializes in fields, D.A. Hogan is her name. We've done some work in looking at how those baseball fields have been scheduled over the last number of years, what the anticipated need is. We do anticipate hosting a couple of those conversations with the baseball groups before we head back out into engagement. There's some other work that I was going to highlight in the director's report, but I'll highlight now. There's also some work we're doing at Tibbetts Valley Park now in the rainy season. We wanted to do some initial site analysis, and so we've done that in terms of really best understanding the hydrology that's happened. I think we all know where Tibbetts Valley Park is and the gorgeous park that it is. It deals with a lot of water throughout the year. So we've worked with the sub-consultant Herrera, our environmental consultant, to dig some wells and give us some analysis and further data about where and how much water is moving through that site. So that work, combined with some of these conversations with baseball, are just going to help us become that much more informed when we go into this next phase of engagement later in the year.
Great, thanks. Also, can you tell us, I can't see, I'm following on the screen here, but where is that engagement part on the calendar for the master planning? Is that like August or September or?
End of Q2 into Q3 sometime to revive that project.
Okay.
So again, we'll just have to kind of wait and see where we're at with engagement. We're having to stay
totally
flexible.
Understand.
Well, anything else on this topic? Anybody? Comments, questions? Not seeing any hands. Get in on this, Jeff?
Yeah, just again, thank you. Our plan is that this will be posted online. This will be something we'd love to bring back to you every quarter. We see this and use this as a working management document for us in that things change, right? How are we negotiating COVID? What can we do in terms of engagement? How are we progressing in terms of these tasks? And so it just becomes a tool for us. Either as work plan items change, things get added to our docket. So look for these to just at least provide us information quarterly and how we're doing.
Good. Thank you for that. Looks like you're up next for talking about Recovery Task Force.
All right. While I kick this off, I think this will be relatively quick. Just wanted to follow up and close the loop. Thank you again for end of last year and some emails we sent out. The Recovery Task Force, which is a group the mayor had created last year, really focusing on COVID recovery and how we're serving, supporting this community from everything from public health to now, vaccination discussion, to how we're utilizing our public spaces and encouraging community to still come together. Marlene, I know you're serving on that committee, so thank you for representing the park board. At the Recovery Task Force meeting, I'm going to share my screen here, on the 14th of this year. Boards and commissions were invited to come and sort of share and express their ideas. Brad and I took part in that conversation. Thank you again for your feedback. We were able to have a conversation. Brad, I think it's safe to say that the park board related public gathering, use of public space topics probably were the most commented and most discussed. So again, really appreciate your creativity. What you're seeing here, I just shared the screen. Tomorrow evening at the City Council study session, the bulk of the study session is a presentation to talk about just citywide pandemic recovery, but then also the Recovery Task Force and some of these ideas and opportunities that came out of that discussion. Following that meeting on the 14th, we circled up with the mayor's office and with staff to really try and explore what we could implement of those ideas. This is one slide that's going to be part of that presentation tomorrow night. I wanted to share with you. These are opportunities that I'm going to present to the council and get their feedback that came out of those opportunities. What they are is furthering this idea of installing some outdoor fitness stations on a site to be determined. We would still need to determine that site. Jen Fink would lead that effort. We would work with community members as well as some professionals in the sports medicine field to determine what type of equipment and where we would locate it. We would need additional resources of about $50,000 to make that happen. But that was an idea that was very well received by the Recovery Task Force. This idea of how we might consider multi-use of our tennis courts. There's some innovative ways that pickleball striping is done, not just on the center net, but also multiple pickleball courts with portable nets that could be added. We would reach out and work with our pickleball community, the pickleball folks that use our community center that are limited as of now with pandemic, but how could we encourage that more outdoors? This idea of exploring scavenger hunt ideas, working with partners on geocaching and other ideas. April, thank you. I know this is an idea that you supported. A lot of support from the Recovery Task Force on that. I've asked our recreation team at the community center. They're going to begin exploring if this is something council wants us to support. They'll be reaching out to you, April, and seeing how we might creatively work with some of the existing geocaching groups and maybe add a scavenger hunt idea. Another idea we're going to talk about tomorrow night is this concept of what we're calling walk and learn tours, where we would create some temporary installations of interpretive signs in various areas of along our city trail system. Brad, I know this is something that you were very fond of, sort of replicating. If any of you have seen what has happened at the state park this month with Martin Luther King interpretive signage celebrating MLK Day. We would work with a number of our partners to identify content, whether it's historical society, library, cultural groups, and set up a series of 3 or 4 areas, again, within our park system. Amy Dukes, who's our arts coordinator, has agreed, should this be something we proceed with, to take the lead in that effort. Again, so Brad, any other park board members that would love to be part of an effort like that, stay tuned. We'll see how the conversation goes tomorrow night. And then another opportunity that was really discussed and affirmed and expressed was our 2021 Concert on the Green series. Really, I think confirming we already have budget in 2021 for this, continuing our efforts with our partners, Kiwanis being a huge partner in that. We very much want to see the show go on. And so it was just really confirmation that even if we need to modify what those concerts look like, we still want to do them, even if they're in a modified fashion, meaning maybe we have to keep crowd size to a certain size. If we need to manage spacing, we want to make sure that there's a summer concert series done in a safe way. There's an additional ask for some funding that should we need to either spread out or add some additional, maybe smaller concerts in some other areas throughout our parks. Again, just as opportunities as summer and fall comes, depending on what's allowable from where we are COVID recovery, just to encourage and foster community coming back together and celebrating their public spaces. So I just wanted to share these with you, say thank you again for your feedback. It was really good discussion with the Recovery Task Force. We'll see how conversation goes with council tomorrow night. Brad, Marlene, I know you were part of that discussion with the Recovery Task Force. Don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that update. Please do.
That looks good, Jeff. Any questions or comments from anyone? Not seeing anything. Does that conclude that part, Jeff? Okay. Brian, it looks like you're up next. You have some community award recommendations here for us.
Yeah, just so you know, as every year, we'd just like to update you on the recommendations we're making. We have the recommendation / award winners, if you will. This has been a unique year, as you know, with 2020 being crazy. I won't go into any details. We all know that. But we have been very active in a lot of areas, despite all the goofiness and craziness we've gone through. Ryan, I know you know about this, so apologies beforehand because I'm going to say a bunch of nice stuff about you. But here we go. Our Youth Leadership Award winner is going to be Ryan Rainey. And did I pronounce that correctly, Ryan? Outstanding. And I've talked to Kathy and Lisa a lot about you, and it's a big surprise. With their words, Ryan's one of a kind. So Ryan, you are, and just a little bit of background so everybody can know some of the things. He's been on our youth advisory board since he was in 6th grade. He's now a junior at Liberty High School. Even in middle school, he was showing leadership. He co-chaired the middle school action committee as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader. He's the community service chair and was last year. He's a huge advocate for the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. Applaud that. I am too. Ryan had participated in the Youth Advisory Board Salmon Days, Fall Fun Fest, State of Mind, and Issaquah Kids Triathlon every year, and he's been on the Youth Advisory Board. And I don't know if you know, but each one of those events entails a lot of planning, and it entails a lot of personal time to actually be on site to help run those events. So Ryan, thank you for that. That's a big commitment just in and of itself. He's volunteered for the Parks and Community Services Mighty Mike Day Camp for 3 summers. Last summer, he actually served as a counselor for the city's Kinder Camp Day Camp. And what is it? Name is Skipper, I heard, right? I don't know if is there a reason behind Skipper? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, so I used to go sailing, and like I did a sailing summer camp over at the Maidenbower Bay Yacht Club with my cousin every summer. So Skipper kind of came from that.
I love it. Outstanding. And I will just finish with, rumor has it, Ryan's also a straight A student and Eagle Scout. So Ryan, you are awesome. And, thank you so much for your service to the community and your service on the advisory board. And you make me feel like I wasted a lot of my high school years. So, but thank you so much for what you've done for us. We appreciate it.
Here. Bravo, Ryan.
I guess we kind of spoiled the surprise here, though, right?
I prefaced, I knew Ryan knew about it, so hopefully this wasn't a surprise. Awesome.
Was it a surprise? Kathy and Lisa reached out to me, I think, like a week ago and told me that I didn't know I was winning anything necessarily. I was just invited to the Community Awards Center. But thank you all very much for the very kind words.
My bad. I actually asked if you knew about it. They told me yes. So, okay, well, never mind. Surprise. Next, we have Tara Michaels and Betty Robertson. They're from the Issaquah Senior Center. They are like librarians extraordinaire, sort of a real-life dynamic duo. Tara and Betty have been at the Issaquah Senior Center since the city took over operations in January of 2017. In a nutshell, they manage all the senior center's books, puzzles, games. This includes like organizing, labeling, and shelving paperback and hardbook covers, categorizing them by mystery, adventure, romance, biographies, history, and other sections of interest. This also includes, them organizing the puzzles and games, making them easy to find, access, and use. We also create a special puzzle program where seniors can take puzzles home to complete on their own. If for some reason coming in and out it's a little hard, we can set them up with puzzles to do on their own in their own location if that's an issue. Under normal circumstances, that it doesn't sound like much, but under normal circumstances, the senior center gets and receives a lot of books, puzzles, and games to go through just normally, much less now that, with all the COVID, people had a lot of time to like clean up their closets and do some of that kind of stuff. So there was a huge volume, so much so that we had to sort of put a stop on it and pause that program for a little bit because it was becoming a lot of stuff to go through. And they have spent countless hours sorting through and cataloging and maintaining all the senior center's books, puzzles, and games. And those that we don't keep, we then make sure they get donated so they can be used elsewhere. Tara and Betty have helped us make the library a welcoming environment where seniors can have a comfy place to sit and read, work on a puzzle, play a game, watch a movie, or sit and visit with their friends. And above all this, they bring a tremendous joy that just uplifts everybody they come into contact with. So, when we asked them, sort of like, hey, how long do you plan on doing this? And how long are you guys in this for? And they said, we could just do this forever, and they don't plan on ever leaving that. So those are the two people from the senior center. And like I said, as we've been allowed to, we've been on this continual decision-making process and sort of the dial. We've allowed things to happen, and then we've had to back them off. We've allowed them to happen as we've been allowed to through the governor's ordinance and guidance. So those are the folks that we have for this year. Oh,
Jeff, you got something?
Yeah, no, Brian, thank you so much, and working with the recreation team on those recommendations. Just a little more context. Yes, as Brian says, 2020 was awkward. It was also awkward for these community awards ceremonies. So the 2020 event was postponed, didn't happen. It's happening this Thursday, the 28th, to celebrate. We just wanted to have a chance to bring those before you. I know it's a quick turnaround. Share with you, we thank some terrific recipients who, we have so many volunteers, and even in the midst of COVID, we had volunteers doing really great things. And these three are just outstanding examples, and would love your blessing, and tune in on the 28th to celebrate these recipients getting their awards, hopefully.
Yeah, appreciate that context, Jeff. Thank you.
So, Ruben, go ahead. Need to unmute, Ruben.
So if you want to join this, is there a Zoom online on the city webpage, or? Okay, great, thanks.
Well, I can make sure you get that too, Ruben. I can send that to Melissa. I think there's a joint page and we can send it out to the park board if you'd like that.
Yep, send the link.
Okay, happy to.
So let's have a motion, please, from somebody to approve these community awards for the 3 people recommended by Brian.
So moved.
Thank you, Ruben. Anybody like to second that? Danielle seconded. And so how about a raise of hands for everyone that approves this?
Oh,
I see everybody's hand from the board. Okay, those 3 recommendations are approved. Thank you.
Yeah, staff voted too. I also see that Ryan did not vote for himself, so humble guy.
Very humble. Very
I know
humble.
so as well.
As a voting member, so.
Okay, thanks for that. And nice job, Ryan. So we'll go on to reports unless there's anything else. I guess I'm up first. We finally changed that to give Jeff a break. And I don't really have much. So actually, and what I do have is rather gloomy, unfortunately. I just wanted to announce to everybody that maybe have not been aware of this, that Chief Andy De Los Angeles from the Snoqualmie tribe passed away last week. And a very sad affair. Chief Andy was just a great leader for the tribe, very inspirational. He was a real strong advocate, which enabled the tribe to actually become federally recognized here a few decades ago. That was a very long fight that he spirited, and probably one of the more significant aspects of some of the things that he provided to the tribe. So he's going to be greatly missed. Don't have much details beyond that right now, but just wanted to at least let everybody know of his passing, and everybody keep him in our thoughts. So that's actually all I had. So Jeff, you're up for anything you'd like to add as a director's report.
Yeah, just 2 quick items to add. Additional lots going on, obviously, as we turn the calendar. I had mentioned, I think, last meeting when budget was adopted, the 21 budget includes the addition of a park operations manager. This is a position that the city hasn't had for a number of years. For the last dozen years, we've had one manager overseeing all of our facilities maintenance, so all of our building maintenance and all of our park maintenance. With the addition of this park operations manager position, it's a real plus for us. That position's been posted. It closed over the weekend on Sunday. We had a really strong pool of candidates as I'm looking at the initial review. So look forward to that screening process happening and having that position on board ideally before we really, I'd love to have someone on board in early March as we head into the spring growing season. So stay tuned for that. And then last item I wanted to update on, as we have looked at youth basketball, I think that is a clear example of our recreation programs that have been impacted by COVID. Brian and I have been working closely with Jared, our athletic supervisor, in crafting a program that we can offer through COVID and through phasing. We have, if any of you are aware, I believe you are, been marketing youth basketball program. That's going to look a little bit different than a league. This isn't going to be a full-blown league as it's historically looked. We've had a lot of community interest. We're over 500 participants who have signed up for that. We've had some really good discussions with the Issaquah School District and how we can deliver this program in a really safe way. The goal is that these participants would be put into pods of 15 or 20 players. that would then be coached and really play inter-squad games within that pod. Again, just an effort to be really creative, really safe, but to allow boys and girls in this community to have an option for some recreation. Where we stand right now, as we are in waiting for transition of King County to go to phase 2. Should we go into phase 2, this would be a program that would be allowed well within those phase 2 parameters. So again, just real hats off to our recreation team as the department. Really, we're trying to strike that balance between being really, really safe, but also offering opportunities for our community, young and old, to recreate. So we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. I think, Jeremy, you got a question about that?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've received any feedback from parents or anything after all those emails went out about how you're doing the basketball with the pods and stuff. I coach I've been coaching for the youth basketball as well. I just thought it was kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work.
Yeah, it's going to be different, but I'd say it's been overwhelmingly positive, given the number of registrations that we've seen in terms of community interested. I think there's a general understanding that it's better than nothing. We would not be able to offer a league that looks like it traditionally looks in 2021. Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add or what you've heard in general from Jared, coaches and parents.
Yeah, no, Jeremy, great question, because this year is just looking unique in the sense of, in order for us to make the pods, making like a larger team, if you will, so they can scrimmage and play amongst that and keep that pod contained, is going to be a different look and feel this year, but it is what fits within the model of what we've been given. And like Jeff mentioned, it's really tough because we just can't have the cross-team play right now with basketball. It's not on the list of approvals right now.
So stay tuned. Yeah, we're still hoping that we can deliver it, that it will be dependent upon public health. Danielle?
I just want to say or add that I think anything that we can do as a community to give opportunities for kids to have something to do, like as a parent, I don't really care if it's, I may expect it to look different and be different, but kids just need something, right? And they need something to look forward to, and they need to know that there's, that they're going to get out of this. And part of that is just by doing more activities. So thank you for being creative and flexible.
Yeah, appreciate those comments, and appreciate, again, the district's been very supportive. We can't do this without some access to schools. Appreciate Mayor Polly and council too, really being supportive of us getting creative and finding that mix of safe, healthy, but also part of safe and healthy is letting kids recreate.
Hey, Jeff, any movement at all on the park ranger position?
Park ranger position, another position that was approved in the 21 budget. Yes, in fact, I was just talking to Human Resources this afternoon. Job description is nearly final. We hope to have that position posted end of this week. Again, with a similar goal of having that position filled as we head into spring. So lots going on in January 2021.
Anything else at it, Jeff?
I think that's enough. Thanks.
Okay. So Ryan, do you have something to share to us from the youth board?
I do. Well, thank you all for having me back again tonight. I have learned a lot about turf and all sorts of other things that I will report back to the Youth Advisory Board tomorrow during our meeting. We have met, I believe, 3 times since the last Parks Board meeting. So I'll just go through what we did at each of those meetings. The first one, we met with a couple other youth leadership groups in the area, with the Highlands Youth Board and some others, and we just had a motivational speaker who came and talked about just effective leadership and different strategies. So that was really great. Our second meeting in December we had was just sort of a holiday party. Usually we have a white elephant gift exchange, which we obviously couldn't really do over Zoom, but we played Holiday Jeopardy and some other games. And then At our last meeting earlier this month, we basically spent the entire meeting brainstorming various ideas for the recovery task force. Myself and some other members on the leadership team went and presented the ideas that the board came up with, but that was just a really good time of brainstorming. We broke up into breakout rooms on Zoom, and that's what we were doing at our last meeting. In terms of events, the first Youth Advisory Board event of the school year happened in December. One group led, I think it was a winter crafts sort of class. And I think it went pretty well from what I've heard. And moving forward, a lot of our groups are getting ready to hold events late March, and into April. We're really starting to get a lot of work done with our groups now that we're done with we sort of reorganized ourselves at the beginning of the school year. And so now that we've really figured out our project groups and that sort of thing, groups are really getting ready to start having events in the spring.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Anything else, Ryan? Anything else, Ryan? Is that good?
That's good.
Good. Thank you so much for that. So, Jeff, do you do this mayor and council update, or does somebody else do that?
Oh, I think I do that too. You should hand that off to someone else.
Melissa,
so
Melissa hasn't said anything.
What's that?
Melissa. I said Melissa would be good for that.
That's right, she would. No, this is now, with all boards and commissions, this is going to be a standing agenda item, and really just that opportunity when there's exchange or an update or request specifically coming from mayor or council or feedback that you want to pull together. I don't have any updates or any communication from mayor or council specifically tonight. I would just reiterate, again, thanks for the turf, the infill discussion. I will take that feedback and that input and share that directly with both mayor and council as that moves forward. So really appreciate those kinds of discussions that we have and just, again, further opportunities for you to influence important elements within these capital projects. So thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So we're just about ready to wind down here. Any new business announcements? Any comments? Somebody'd like to sing a song? Anything? I know Brian would like to do a dance, but we probably don't have time for that.
Don't know that you can handle it, Brad.
He does do a mean two-step.
I imagine.
Sadly enough, it's true, actually, yes.
So nothing else going on and no comments. I'd say that this is a good time to adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for the evening, and see you next month.
Nice seeing everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.